this email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or
The
news.
single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with David Aaker, the father of modern branding, vice chairman at Profit, and best-selling author of 18 books. We pick up the discussion with David explaining how organizations can uncover stories and storytellers, even if they think they don't have anything interesting to share.
Well, yeah, you need two things. You find good stories, and then you've got to find people that can present them and distribute them to the right audiences. And incidentally, a really important audience is employees. But one thing I do, and I wrote a book about this. It's called it's about purpose-driven brands, and the idea is that if you really have nothing to say that people are going to get involved with or get emotional about or anything, nothing to say, it's really good to look to find a signature social program, because that can provide energy, that can provide an image lift, that can provide engagement. And as I mentioned, one of my examples that I like to use is Dove, because first of all, we have numbers for Dove. We know they increased sales from 2.6 to 6.5 in 17 years, but also they helped literally hundreds of millions of women and girls have a better life, have better self-confidence, and so on. So it's such a win-win. But again, you think about it, Dove it's got nothing to say that's of interest to anybody as far as their products go.
Right.
They don't have anything to say as far as their organization goes either, except that when they created the Real Beauty program, and incidentally, they did that in a desperate time, because their moisturizer sort of leading advantage, the patent ran out, and others had moisturizers, and then they went into things like deodorant, and moisturizer isn't exactly a plus for deodorants, and so they needed something new, and then they stumbled on this fact that 2% of the world's women regarded themselves as beautiful. And that just sparked somebody in the organization. And then they started to study that, and they became really a thought leader and so on. And they developed all these great experiments to demonstrate how that is. And in one, they had two doors for beautiful people and not beautiful. And they just asked me, why did you go through this door? And they had another where they had sketch artists that from a woman's description of herself drew her, and then from the description of a stranger who was looking at her, they drew that too. And the stranger's description was much more attractive than the person herself. And so they ran ads about this. And in 2013, Clinton, you won't believe this, that was the most viral ad in the history of advertising. That ad went more viral than any other ad in the history of advertising. Again, this is bar soap we're talking about. Anyway, and that it just struck a chord. I mean, it just struck a chord. And so anyway, my advice is to companies that find it hard to find, customer stories or employee stories or product stories that will really capture people's imagination, and incidentally should be over a long time period. We're not talking about a one season promotion or anything. We're talking about 17 years or something. Anyway, I think that one place to look is social programs. Find a signature social program. You don't have to make them. You can adopt a nonprofit, like Thriven adopted Habitat for Humanity 17 years ago. And it's not that well known except among their 2 million customers and their families. And every one of those knows about the Habitat mission at Thrive It, and how some teams go in Africa and they have their own take on a little bit of their take. They've even got a brand on it called Build It or something. Anyway, that's one of my advices.
I think I'm probably going to get the company wrong, and I apologize in advance. I think it was Salesforce. Somebody had a 1-1-1 program.
Oh, that's Salesforce, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting for a lot of reasons. One of the things is that, I'm sure you have entrepreneurs in your audience that are just starting, and Salesforce had the social program 1-1-1 in the first week of their existence. They're sending 3 people in a hotel room and designing this company, and 1-1-1 was part of their design. Actually, the founder of Salesforce, he left Oracle, and where he was a really top executive, but he wanted his own company, and he took a sabbatical, went to India, and he talked to a guru in India for 3 months or so, who told him, you can have a company that can do social good. It's possible. And so he came back. That was part of his inspiration. He was going to develop a company that was going to do social good out of the box, and so he developed this 1-1-1. The other thing about the 1-1-1 program is that it not only is still alive, but they opened it up 6 or 7 years ago to other companies with a challenge. Why don't you do that? They got something like 300 companies that are doing that. Can you imagine the impact that that's made? I mean, talk about leveraging or scaling. I mean, just to do it yourself is pretty meaningful, but to get 300 companies, some of them large, to do that, you've multiplied the ability of American enterprise to help do social good. It's manyfold.
And sometimes the story is actually, even if they're not social good, you tell the story of, I think it's Columbia Pictures and Lowe's Theaters, and how the guy used the story of Lawrence of Arabia to really bring the troops together, because he had 3 disparate businesses that were, I guess, none of them really doing that well. But then through the story, he brought them all together, and they turned the company around.
Yeah, the idea there was that he wanted people to behave like Lawrence of Arabia. And a way to do that was to tell the Lawrence of Arabia story or bring it to their attention. And I think that the larger point here is that stories are extraordinarily important for internal use, for building a culture within a company. That's almost impossible to do without some stories. Often it's the founder story, but it can be some, brand pillar of the brand culture.
Now, what are some of the common mistakes an organization might make when they're trying to tell their story? Did they get too factual or too nebulous? What are some of the common mistakes?
Well, I can tell you for B2B businesses,
Right.
On one hand, they are the ones that are the best at creating stories. Our consulting company, Profit, we have 100 of them, maybe more, 100 stories. And
So you practice what you preach. I love it.
well, not necessarily, because all these stories are dumbed down to one page, and they don't have. There's a few exceptions, but by and large, they've taken out all the tension of how you did this great thing. They've taken out all the people. You don't get to know any of the people that are involved. They take out anything that would be of interest. So it just comes down to a very dry, we did this, and the client thought, we are wonderful people, and this was a great job, and it improved the company. And there's nothing. There's no magic of storytelling there at all. And I think that's not only true with our company, I think that's true with many B2B companies. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that they're sensitive to clients. They think that clients might be offended or not happy with hearing their sorry state of affairs that once existed. Or the clients might figure, I figured this out, and I don't want to let my competitors know, because then they'll figure it out, which is almost always nothing, is not going to happen. But nevertheless, even if the client thinks it might happen, then the brand firm is reluctant to go into detail. And then there's sometimes they're reluctant to tell a customer story because they think the customer, even not in a bead contest, in other contests, like a nonprofit will think, oh, our clients don't want to be exposed because they're a little ashamed. And that's also not true. A lot of them are quite eager to tell our stories. So anyway, that's one reason that B2B people. Another reason is just that they have this format. It's a one-page format or it's a 3-minute video format, whatever the format is. And they don't develop a format that is suitable to tell that story. And the third problem is that especially B2B companies don't have people that are good at this. I mean, they didn't hire anybody that's good at storytelling. They didn't hire anybody that's good at finding stories. And so therefore, the stories tend to be, shallow. They tend to be uninteresting. And even stories that could have a lot of intrigue, be very intriguing, but they not, well, and then of course, well, anyway, some companies are hiring newspaper people or press people or reporters because they're good at sniffing out stories and they're good at writing up stories. And so we're seeing that.
There were a couple of stories you told that I had never heard of, but the interesting part to me was that they're actually told more often by the clients than they are the companies themselves. There was a story of Nordstrom buying back the worn out tires, things they didn't sell, and then Zappos with delivery for pizza, finding restaurants that were open. There are two companies going out of their way it kind of speaks to the culture of the companies. So it's a great story to tell internally for new employees about here's who we are as a company, but then the customers eat it up.
Yes. That word seeps out to the customers, but it's quite amazing. When I was given some talks on branding locally, I would ask people to raise their hand how many have heard of that Nordstrom story. And 60% of the audience would raise their hand. Nordstrom's has not mentioned or publicized in any way that story for decades, maybe never. It's not something they ever talk about. 60% of the people knew about it. I mean, isn't that extraordinary?
It is.
And that means that the story is so graphic. I mean, people bringing in a used tire, even if it was a tire shop, you wouldn't replace a used tire with a new tire. I mean, it wore out.
And then trusting the customer what they said they paid and giving them that money back.
Yeah. Anyway, and it turned out it was a Nordstrom store, but there was on that site a tire store way back when. And this guy had bought the tire at that site.
But the employee, I think if I recall the story, was a new employee, but he knew that he would be backed up and doing what he did. So
yeah, that's right. And that was really the point of the story. It wasn't so much the return policy as it was the empowerment to the employees.
Yeah, and there was the other story on Zappos where a customer called in and said they couldn't find a pizza restaurant that was open, and so clearly nothing to do with shoes, but the guy actually went out and Googled, I guess, and found some restaurants that were open 24 hours that sold pizza. And again, it's one of those powerful anecdotes. It just keeps going. Yeah,
and the point there, of course, is that you're not there just to process orders. You're there to deal with the customer's needs.
One of the things I'm curious about is how does fostering a storytelling culture help your employees become more effective communicators and leaders, or does it? Is there a correlation?
Good question. I think that there's a lot of things you can do to make your employees more effective. And I think that knowing about having a sort of a repertoire of stories to tell, when friends said, what do you do? What does your company do? If you could answer with a story or two to illustrate, instead of saying that, we go way and above and beyond making pizza and processing pizza orders. So let me tell you a story. And so as a way to communicate who you are to your friends and relatives, I think that would be, I think that would be a good thing to do.
And we touched on humor already, but that's a powerful aspect of stories, and I love humor. I find it can be quite helpful.
As a matter of fact, my daughter Jennifer, I don't want to keep bringing her up, but she wrote a book called Humor Seriously. And the idea of that is that humor in managing a company or being in a team is really important because, if you're have a team situation, and see if this doesn't strike you right, Clint. If you're in a team situation and there's some tension, maybe there's a power struggle, maybe there's a disagreement or something, and somebody interjects humor, everybody lets out a sigh of relief and gets more creative. I mean, they've proved that if you introduce humor into a team situation, it'll be more creative.
Right.
And of course, it does so many things for the author of the humor. It makes them, much less autocratic. Makes them much more of a likable person, and I think that for most people, in most cases, that will help their management effectiveness. Not everybody, and not all cases. There's always the Bobby Knights and the Steve Jobs of the world, but on average, it's probably going to help people to become more effective.
Yeah, and if you're one of these people who are thinking that, you gave the Dove example, you said because we have data, but what if there's a company who or somebody in the organization who thinks that storytelling is squishy and soft and you really can't measure it, yet in the book you talk about you can actually use stories to help seal the deal by giving context to facts.
Yes, it's not the case you have to embed your facts in a story. A story can be used to motivate facts. You give the story and say, and then did you know, then 40% of da whatever. Or you can give the facts first and quickly say, let me illustrate with a story. And then the facts sort of come to life. So there's those three ways that a story can be involved in getting across descriptions and facts and feelings and values.
Stories can take many different forms. You're obviously a prolific author, so you do a lot of writing, as do I. But then you give examples in the book about Red Bull, and of course I had to stop reading, go YouTube it to see what the guy jumping out of 8,000 feet or whatever it was in the air, and then hitting 600. I think he broke the speed barrier coming down. And so, what do you think the role of these technologies are in storytelling with virtual reality coming, AI, digital, et cetera?
Well, that's a good question too. I think I would maybe reflect that and ask you the same question. But I think that AI is when it comes to branding, helps us develop brand strategies a lot faster, and it helps us develop and test out typical content and ads faster. And I just don't know about stories. I'm sure it would have a role, but I'm not used it in that way or not.
Okay. I am curious, you give so many, I love stories, and you give so many different examples in the book of different stories. And do you have like a favorite? Did any of them that really just has been your favorite child in that sense?
Well, I can think of a couple. One I really like is the story about the CEO of a Chinese company that was struggling, and he was elevated to CEO to try to save the company. They made appliances, and 2 or 3 weeks after theirs, a customer came in and said, "I've got a defective appliance." He said, "No problem. We'll go to the warehouse," where he found that 20% of all the appliances there were also defective. He brought them into the factory floor and got a sledgehammer and had his employees destroy them. And he said, from that moment on, we're going to build only quality appliances. That company is now the leading appliance manufacturer in the world, Haier. And that story is in every employee's mind and every retailer's mind today, and probably some consumers as well. But they've enshrined the sledgehammer at home office, and you don't have to say that. We're really we do great quality work. Well, how believable is that? I mean, or how differentiating is that? However, to say that, remember the sledgehammer story, and then it graphically comes into place, and you get an instinct that there's probably nobody better than higher quality because of that story.
I can envision every new hire getting a little miniature sledgehammer paperweight for their desk, a reminder.
And then there's a lot of stories around these signature social programs. One is Barclays. Barclays was the least trusted brand and the least trusted industry in 2010 because they were blamed for that financial collapse through the LIBOR stuff. And nothing they could do could change that. They said, we're not really, we weren't all the only one responsible. And anyway, we've changed and you can believe in us now. And then they developed a social program called Digital Eagles, which is 17 employees help customers, elderly especially, to deal with the digital world. And then they created a video of a couple of their clients. One of which was a guy named Rich that was a soccer player, but he hurt his knee, could no longer play soccer, but he could play walking soccer. 6 on a side, he only walked. And he wanted a website that would promote the sport. And so he got Digital Eagles to help them. They showed a video about that. You got to know Steve Rich, you got to know his wife, you got to know his grandson, you got to know his mates. And it was just such an emotional uplift to see how walking soccer had changed his life. And they put out that video, and trust went up 35%, consideration went up 130% or something. And they broke through the trust thing. And these increases were much more than competitors. Anyway, so that's an example of how a story can really touch people and do what other communications couldn't.
If there's one story that every leader should be able to tell, what is it?
I think there is no one story. I mean, it can come from customers, it can from a founder, it can from a program, why we developed this program, or how we got this new product out, and what are the barriers we overcame. Or so it could be, and it could be about a social program that's connected to our brand. So there's no one story. I don't think it's so idiosyncratic to the situation.
Yeah, because there's multiple audiences to receive that story. So as we wrap up, I'm going to ask you 3 questions that I ask all my guests. First one is, are there any leadership principles that speak to you personally and guide your day-to-day behaviors?
Really good question. Well, I'm a sort of a student of leadership and CEO, an amateur student, I should say. And I've always been wondering how these guys like Steve Jobs and Bobby Knight and the more recent examples can be effective. And one of the things they do is they really understand the business. I mean, Bobby Knight really knew what a basketball player was supposed to do. I mean, he was really good at it at a detail level. Mm-hmm. And so he could go on the floor and show how to set a screen. And it wasn't managing from a high level, delegating. And the other thing he did was he made his employers better. And so did Steve Jobs. And to this day, you look at people worked under either of those, and they will say, boy, I'm so glad I did, because I became a better professional than I ever thought I could become. He just he raised people to a new level. These are the people that survived being under him. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people that left that didn't. But third, they were success. They were so successful, and success sort of masks a lot of different problems. It's a lot easier to be okay when you're successful. And for every Steve Jobs and Bobby Knight, we have, 50 that weren't successful under that strategy and did a lot of bad things. But what it shows that it's hard to generalize.
Yeah.
Only one quality is always good. Having said that, I think somebody that's supportive and humorous and so on is got a bigger chance of winning.
What's the best piece of advice you ever been given?
Well, I think this guy, George Lakoff, that wrote the book, that said it's more important to decide what the conversation is about than winning the conversation argument. I think that's meant the most to me, I think.
Okay. And what is the best book or article you've read recently, and what was the key takeaway?
Well, it would be that one, George
Same
Lakoff's book. But the art of, let's see, there's a lot of others, but I like to read books about CEOs, the strategy they did, and there's been some great ones out by the CEO of IBM, of Pepsi-Cola, of Unilever, and those I find really instructive.
And you said there was kind of one of your favorite books there's a professor who wrote, was it The Elephant in the Room or something like that?
Yeah, that's George Lakoff.
Okay. All right. I'm definitely going to pick that one up. So, David, this has been great. If people want to learn more about you or engage with Prophet, how can they do that? I have a blog on LinkedIn, and so that's one way to keep up with me. And Aaker on Branding, the second edition, is a good way to get an overview of all my branding books. All right. Well, David, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Okay, my pleasure, Clint.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.